Welcome back for episode 4 of Disturbing Reddit Posts. The title of the video is pretty self-explanatory, so be sure to check out the playlist to watch the previous episodes. Let's investigate. If you enjoy internet mysteries and generally disturbing content, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can become a Ko-fi member or a channel member to access uncut videos and other perks, or you can leave me a tip by clicking the thanks under this video. Thanks to anyone who considers this. This video will contain discussions of topics that some might find triggering. Viewer discretion is advised. You can become a Ko-fi member or a channel member to watch an uncut version of this video, which features a whole extra entry that was unsuitable for this cut. In January 2022, a photo was shared on the Morbid Reality subreddit that can only be described as absolutely harrowing. It shows a young boy in what appears to be a bathtub, his eyes wide open, staring at the camera. The title of the post is, "A boy during the Russian famine of 1921 to 1922 who killed his 3-year-old brother and ate him." This photo appears in a Wikipedia article about the Russian famine that gives some more detail on the event. The end of the First World War was not the end of conflict in Russia at the time, as a civil war was beginning, sparked by the overthrowing of the monarchy and the new government's failure to maintain stability. The two main combatants were the Red Army, short for the Workers' and Peasants' Red Army, who fought for the Bolshevik form of socialism, and the White Army, made up of soldiers whose interests regarding different policies varied greatly, but they were united in their opposition to the Red Army. Between 1918 and 1920, all armies in the war had seized food from those who grew it to provide for their soldiers and supporters, while denying it to their enemies. The Bolshevik government basically ordered poor farmers to hand over the food they produced and gave them nothing or next to nothing in return, resulting in them decreasing production. This led to a series of famines that caused an extremely high death toll. The exact number varies greatly from source to source. Aid was offered to Russia, for example in 1919 from the American Relief Administration, but the Bolshevik government declined because it was on the condition that America would control the Russian railway network and hand out food to all citizens impartially, and this was seen as interference in Russian internal affairs. Eventually, in the summer of 1921, Vladimir Lenin, head of the Soviet government, wrote an open letter to Europe and America asking for food and medicine, to which American politician Herbert Hoover responded immediately and initiated negotiations that resulted in an agreement where the American Relief Administration would provide food for 1 million people, mostly children. Other countries responded to the letter too, but the ARA was by far the main contributor, and within the next year it was providing meals for more than 10 million people daily. The relief efforts were helping to mitigate the effects of the famine, but other problems were becoming evident. There was a fuel shortage, meaning that cooking the food was becoming difficult, and millions of Russian peasants were lacking sufficient clothing to survive the winters. Most had clothes made of rags, which inevitably would have led to death from cold exposure. Herbert Hoover came to the rescue again and made plans to collect clothing packages from American citizens, businesses and banks to send to Russia. He also arranged for the ARA to distribute medical supplies, which were in high demand too. In March 2021, convinced by the famine, Vladimir Lenin finally reversed his policies and decreed the new economic policy that would include a free market and capitalism, both subject to state control, which was successful in creating an economic recovery after the devastating chain of events that occurred from World War I, but a lot of damage had already been done. The Civil War lasted 5 years and 7 months, ending on the 16th of June 1923, with between 7 and 12 million total casualties, including civilians, and to say life was extremely difficult for the general public during that time would be a huge understatement. An official Soviet publication in the early 1920s stated that there were around 5 million deaths in 1921 from famine and related disease. However, other sources estimated that there were much fewer, possibly less than 1 million or 2 million. Others gave much higher figures, even as many as 10 million, so the death toll is highly disputed. Either way, the famines caused great suffering, and apparently people resorted to eating cats and dogs, and even grass, dirt, and leather horse harnesses. The boy in the photo shared on Reddit was named Ilarion Nishenko, who lived in the village of Blagoveshenka in Ukraine. I wasn't able to find out any more information about him, so I have no idea exactly how old he was at the time or what happened to him after. Whether what must have been the hardest decision he ever made ended up saving his life, or if he perished like so many others. You can see the trauma in his eyes and almost feel his pain. This has to be one of the most emotive photos I've ever seen. The Wikipedia article features other horrifying images too. Some are too graphic to show here. They include piles of corpses, frail-looking children with swollen stomachs, and one of a severed human head and other body parts on a table that were being sold as food. Cannibalism certainly wasn't unheard of throughout that time. If anyone died, it made sense to make use of their remains, and parents were even killing and eating their children. Police usually took no action because in some cases, cannibalism was the only method of survival. These stories are a powerful reminder of just how horrendous the effects of war can be, and in a situation where upholding your moral values will inevitably lead to your own death, it's hardly surprising that people will go to such extreme lengths to survive. Around a year ago, there was a post on the Dating Over 30 subreddit for rants, fence, and open discussion. Obviously, I'm not someone who is dating over 30, but there are some interesting posts on there, so I sometimes have a scroll through. Anyway, perhaps the most disturbing comment I found on the thread was this. I invited this guy to my house to sleep over for the first time last night after our 4th date. He has to work today and got ready in my bathroom. After he left, I went in there to find a massive smelly shit in my toilet that he didn't flush. This is a toilet in perfect working order, people. My whole bathroom reeked. Is this some kind of literal shit test? Was he marking his territory? Or is this just someone with no manners? I can't help but be really turned off by this. I know we all poop, but after only 4 dates, I wasn't really wanting to come face to face with his morning juice. I joke, of course. As disgusting as this is, it certainly isn't the most disturbing comment on there. Though it did leave me questioning what the f is wrong with people. Anyway, one that came close is actually the top comment on the thread. It read, "Matched with this 37-year-old divorced father of one last week. Not a deal breaker, but have reservations about other people's kids. He was a little on the over-eager side, but I just thought he was being enthusiastic. We agreed on a date, and then a couple of days before, he found me on Facebook. This is a little alarming because my Tinder and Facebook names are completely different, so he has to put in some effort to find me, I think. Anyway, I thought never mind, he's just over-enthusiastic. Had the date, not what I was expecting. He used pictures a lot younger looking, and I just didn't find him attractive. He was quite effeminate, and that's not my type. He was also intense. I was just not comfortable, but he didn't do anything wrong, and he did gentlemanly things, but I was on edge. I've been thinking about how to let him down gently today when he messages me, 'Found you,' with a link to a video I did years ago in Chinese on Chinese media. That was the last straw. I feel like he's been stalking me online, and he knows where I live. Not the exact address, but it's small enough to find me. Why are some guys like this? Are they aware of what they're doing and how creepy and scary they're coming across as?" Although this man hasn't actually harmed OP, yet, there are some huge red flags, and just as she expressed, I really don't understand why some people do things like this. From the start, he used photos where he looked a lot younger. Now we all have photos where we look a bit better than we do in real life, and if you use a dating app, of course you're not going to upload the worst photos of yourself, but it always baffles me when people use photos from 10 years ago, or with filters that make them look like a totally different person. To me, it just comes across as a bit manipulative, like someone thinks they can rope you in with an inaccurate representation of themselves, and by the time you meet them and realise they look nothing like their photos, it's too late. And in some cases, particularly if you're a polite person or if you feel unsafe, you're probably going to stay for the date, giving them more of a chance to manipulate you if that's the kind of person they are. The fact that the man found OP on Facebook is just creepy and very inappropriate. I'm guessing he must have reverse searched her photos, assuming she used the same ones on Tinder as on Facebook. She probably should have called off the date then and there, but in these situations, people often rationalise behaviour and convince themselves they're overreacting. It's more comforting to just assume someone is enthusiastic and has different ways of doing things, rather than acknowledge you may be going on a date with a psychopath who now knows your real name, your address, and has access to any information you share on social media. Thankfully, OP left the date without getting kidnapped, and the man didn't do anything wrong, but I think the fact that she didn't feel comfortable and was on edge is enough reason to not see him again. Gut instinct is by no means 100% reliable, but sometimes your unconscious mind picks up on things that you aren't consciously aware of, so if something just doesn't feel right, it's probably better not to risk it, especially when your safety and perhaps even your life is at stake. It seems that this man has been researching OP quite extensively if he managed to find a video she appeared in years ago, and when he said "found you" when he sent it to her just makes it so much creepier. OP stated in a reply that she blocked him, which was probably the best course of action. She could have messaged him explaining that he creeped her out and so she doesn't want to see him again, but sometimes there's just no rationalising with people like this, and she also ran the risk of provoking him further. 9 days later, OP made a separate post on the subreddit titled, "Went on a date with a guy last week and I blocked him because I got stalker vibes, and yet he found another way to contact me." Here's what she said. "Well, now he's been calling me from a no-caller ID and he started messaging me on an app from a different number. I usually would advise others to just freeze them out with a no response until they get bored, but my anxiety is through the roof. So I'm seeking advice. Should I continue to freeze out or should I respond truthfully? I'm sorry to say that yes, something is wrong. I feel like you finding me so much online is really scary. I'm sorry I didn't tell you before I disappeared, but I was too scared to say. I was already feeling uncomfortable and was thinking about how to let you know that we're not a good match. The decision to block instead of communication came when you messaged me, 'found you,' before I had the chance to politely say we're not a good match, and that really freaked me out so much. Now I'm being tracked down from another number only makes me more scared of you since you're not taking no for an answer. Imagine that it was your daughter in my position right now and how you would feel if a man she barely knows was behaving in a way that scared her, so I'm telling you not to contact me again." Edit. Subsequently to this post, I have read up on the law and sadly there is no harassment law in my country of residence. It sucks, so I'll have to be on the alert. I think I'll let the community in which I live and the chiefs know, and perhaps I can get some sort of protection that way. More edit to add. I really appreciate your thought and support. Thanks guys. I just hope he'll get bored. I'll just continue to ignore him this time, but not block him. Blocking again might trigger something. OP shared a screenshot of the message he sent her asking why she blocked his number. He's clearly oblivious to how creepy his actions were, and honestly I think that's the scariest thing about people like this. They just don't have the self-awareness to understand what they did wrong in the first place and can't take the hint when they get blocked that you don't want to pursue anything with them. Even when she ignored his first messages, he sent another the next day as if nothing happened. I really empathise with OP in the situation she's in. Obviously, he hasn't taken any steps to physically harm her, and he hasn't shown up at her home or place of work, which is somewhat reassuring, but also means that she can't take any legal action against him. She probably feels like a sitting duck, waiting to see if he decides to escalate things, and in the meantime not knowing what to do herself. If she blocks him again, that might provoke him. If she responds, that might also provoke him, or give him the delusional impression that if he persists, he might eventually convince her to meet him again. And if she ignores him, he might just try to find more ways to contact her in a way that she can't just not open the message. There are much more horrifying stalker stories on Reddit that got taken much further, but what's unsettling about this one is just how common it is. It seems that a high percentage of people who have spent a decent length of time on Tinder and have been on many dates have at least one story where someone just won't leave you alone. You don't even have to have met someone for them to become obsessed and start trying to contact you on various social media. It's a really scary world out there. It doesn't look like OP ever provided any more updates, but she was posting as frequently as 1 month ago, so thankfully she's still alive, and I assume the stalker eventually gave up. I found the next post on the Best of Redditor Updates subreddit, which is without a doubt one of my favourite communities on the site. There are so many fascinating, bizarre and shocking tales on there, and the original post and updates are all compiled into one post so you don't have to hunt for later posts to find out how the story ended. A recent one was from a post that was shared on the True Off My Chest subreddit just over a month ago, titled, "I'm worried my fiancé, male 34, is attracted to my stepbrother, male 18. OP is a 33-year-old woman who felt disgusting for even thinking this was a possibility, but couldn't shake the feeling after she noticed her fiancé acting weird on a few occasions. She called her stepbrother Tim and her fiancé Mike, not their real names, and said that Tim has been part of the family since he was a little boy and they've always been very close. OP had been in a relationship with Mike for 10 years, and they'd been friends for a few years prior to that, so Mike had known Tim since he was a young age, and they've always got on very well. Tim was described as a sweet, bubbly kid, friendly and affectionate, and a little flirty with certain people, though in a harmless way. He just seemed to be having fun and likes the attention, and people often flirt back, including OP's friends. In fact, she had to cut out one of her female friends who had taken the flirting way too far and ended up having inappropriate contact with him when he was 17 and she was 36. Tim had consented to this contact but felt guilty after and confessed to OP, and of course it's pretty messed up for a 36-year-old woman to go for a 17-year-old. So it sounds like OP absolutely did the right thing cutting contact with her. Anyway, Tim hasn't ever flirted with Mike, but OP noticed that in the last few months, when Tim flirts with other people, Mike tries to involve himself. He's also quite touchy with Tim and hugs him a lot, ruffles his hair, tickles him, etc., which seems a bit weird now Tim is 18 and not a child anymore. Mike has also asked Tim some not safe for work personal questions, which OP felt was very inappropriate, and she also noticed Mike browsing Tim's Instagram on 2 separate occasions, noting that he acted guilty when he saw OP was there. Apparently Mike has never given any indication that he's interested in men, while Tim came out as bi around a year ago. OP acknowledged it doesn't sound like much, but said that she just gets a strange vibe from Mike when he's around Tim, and didn't know how to proceed, as if she asks Mike, he wouldn't take it well. As I said in the last post, even when you don't have that much evidence to definitively know that something is off, when it just doesn't feel right, there's often a reason for that. Does OP have enough reason to accuse Mike of having a thing for her brother? No. But does she have enough reason to bear it in mind and keep an eye on him? Absolutely. OP posted an update a few days after Christmas Day, which is when the situation came to a head. Quote, "I didn't have a chance to speak to anyone in my family about my concerns before we all spent Christmas together, and it didn't seem like it would be appropriate timing anyway. Mike and I were due to spend the day at my mum and stepdad's home. Tim still lives there full time. We live nearby, so we weren't staying over. My mum mentioned the day before that Tim was inviting a friend whose family doesn't celebrate. This isn't an unusual situation, so I didn't think anything of it. When Mike and I arrived, Tim's friend was already there. They were both very friendly and polite, then after a while they went to play video games together in the main seating area. It was quite obvious they either liked each other or were already dating. They were awkwardly flirting with each other and holding hands when they thought no one was looking. Everyone, apart from Mike, thought it was cute. Mike was extremely quiet and snappy for more or less the entire time we were there. He was drinking more than usual. I was driving, so I didn't drink at all. My parents only had a drink or two, so it stood out. He snapped at me when I asked what was wrong and when I suggested he slow down. It was very uncomfortable. My mum and Tim were both getting anxious. Tim's friend seemed confused. My stepdad was obviously losing patience with Mike's behaviour. We ended up leaving right after dinner because I was so uncomfortable and he was silent the whole journey home. When we got back, I asked him what the hell his problem was. I don't remember precisely what was said, so I'm mostly paraphrasing. He said he guessed that he was the only one who noticed what a rude little shit Tim was being, and that he ignored everyone and spent the whole day making out with his friend. He used a very aggressive tone of voice and sarcastic air quotes when he said friend. I told him that was totally untrue, and even if it wasn't, I couldn't understand why he would be so irate about my little brother paying more attention to his friend than him. I asked him why he's been so weird around Tim, but I made absolutely no reference to the specific concerns I'd been having. Mike completely lost his temper and said, "Are you saying you think I want to f your little brother?" or something similar. It was a bizarre outburst, and he said some very unpleasant, graphic things which he decided I was accusing him of. This was unprompted by me, and I don't see how he would have jumped straight to that conclusion unless there was an element of truth to it. I don't remember exactly what I said in response. I didn't really challenge him, and I told him he was scaring me. He went to the spare room and slammed the door. I drove back to my parents' place and told them we had a fight. I've been staying there since. I told Mike we need to talk, and he said I agree, but he's barely been in contact and hasn't responded to any of my suggestions of when we could talk. I have no idea what's happening. My family are obviously aware something is wrong, but I haven't fully explained it and I don't know how. They noticed it's directed at Tim, but they seem to think it's due to homophobia rather than anything else. Tim is upset and worried. I really don't know how honest I should be with him. I don't even know for sure what Mike's issue is. I've told him he's done nothing wrong and it's Mike's problem. Obviously Mike and I haven't made any decision about our relationship because we've barely spoken. It doesn't look positive. I don't know if I could feel the same about him after how he's behaved. His strange behaviour around Tim is also one of several things I've been worried about, and his outburst scared me no matter what caused it. Mike's behaviour on that day is not only totally out of order but quite suspicious too, and his reaction when Opie asked him what the problem was is very concerning. She never accused him of anything, and yet he instantly got defensive and assumed she was implying he had a thing for her brother. She posted another update after they spoke more in depth about the situation, and I'm sure you can guess roughly where this is heading. I received a text from Mike saying he wants to talk, but wants to explain in writing first to allow him to express himself calmly. He said, "I know what you think this is, and I understand why, but I promise it's not like that." He then told me he sent an email and asked me to read it before speaking. I'm paraphrasing because it was a long personal email. He said he experienced confusions about his sexuality when he was a little younger than Tim is now. It went badly, a close friendship ended, and he ended up never addressing those feelings and ignoring that part of himself. Tim coming out brought out a lot of confusing feelings. He admitted that he did initially believe he was attracted to Tim / jealous of people Tim was interested in. He admitted he did think about himself. He said he never would have acted on this, and he was disgusted with himself for thinking that way, which caused even more difficult feelings. He said he now realises that he is envious because he regrets never exploring when he was Tim's age, and seeing him now makes him feel bitter, especially seeing him with his friend / boyfriend. He apologised for his behaviour and for lashing out the way he did, and he hopes we can talk. I haven't replied. I do plan to talk to him. I have a lot of questions. His explanation makes sense in some ways, but I don't know if I'm comfortable with it. It doesn't change the angry outbursts or the fact that he thought about my little brother sexually. I don't know if that's something I can accept and move on from. So Opie's suspicions were right all along. I personally think Mike probably downplayed his feelings to Opie. Him admitting that he thought about her brother at all in that way is disturbing enough, but I don't really buy that he initially believed he was attracted to Tim and then realised it was actually envy because he regrets not exploring when he was Tim's age. His total lack of control on Christmas Day would imply that his feelings for Tim were stronger than he's trying to make out. Bear in mind, he's a 34-year-old man, not a teenager, and his behaviour on that day was enough to make the whole family concerned. I totally acknowledge that sexuality is something that a lot of people struggle with, and especially as an adult, if you've repressed those feelings for most of your life, it's bound to wear you down and cause a lot of psychological distress. But why did this only manifest when Mike saw Tim with another guy, and not when Tim came out in the first place? Not to mention his inappropriate behaviour around Tim. Asking him personal questions that a fully grown adult really shouldn't be asking his fiance's much younger brother, who he's known since he was 7 or 8 years old. Here's a quote from the next post after OP spoke to Tim about the situation. He was just asking if I was okay after arguing with Mike. Obviously, it's not usual for me to stay with my parents. However, I got the impression there were things he was holding back. I apologised for Mike's behaviour at Christmas, and I asked him if he'd noticed Mike behaving strangely or making him uncomfortable before now. He said yes. He thinks Mike has been acting differently around him since he came out. He mentioned the very intrusive personal questions as an example, and I agreed that it was completely inappropriate for Mike to talk to him like that. He said he didn't want to make a big thing of it because he knows some straight people get overly curious. He didn't seem fully convinced by that. I told him I was very concerned about how Mike was speaking to him and behaving around him, and I asked if he'd done or said anything else to make him uncomfortable. He said there was nothing big, and he didn't want to imagine Mike would ever do that or view him in that way. He said he felt uncomfortable at times at things he's said or the way he's been looking at him or talking to him, but he felt bad for feeling that way. I tried to reassure him that he's done nothing wrong and it's completely unacceptable for Mike to treat him that way, and he isn't wrong to feel uncomfortable. I tried to encourage him to open up, but he didn't want to. Tim saying that nothing big happened seems to imply that something happened. It doesn't sound like there's been any actual contact between the two of them, but perhaps Mike has made subtle advances towards him and he doesn't want to discuss it. Partly because he blames himself, and he might even be embarrassed about it, even though it's not in any way his fault. And also because he doesn't want to upset OP more. OP and Tim spoke again shortly after, and Tim admitted that there were multiple occasions where he felt uncomfortable because Mike got far too close, was looking at him very intently, or put his hand on his leg or touched his face. OP ended her relationship with Mike after all this, and she without a doubt made the right decision. I can't help but wonder if they'd been together for longer, if Mike's behaviour would have escalated. I don't doubt for a second that had Tim reciprocated, Mike likely would have taken the situation further. In the final update, which was just a few days ago at the time of writing this script, OP revealed that Mike had been harassing Tim, presumably contacting him on social media. It sounds like the situation has deeply affected Tim. He gets upset often, blames himself, and apologises to OP. She's noticed that he doesn't seem like himself and he's now in therapy. This is honestly just an awful situation all round. OP's relationship with the man she planned to marry has been destroyed, and Tim seems to be absolutely traumatised by what happened. I really hope they find a way to move past it and that they never encounter Mike or anyone like him ever again. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments, plus any suggestions you might have for a future episode of Disturbing Reddit Posts. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Huge thank you to my Ko-fi members and channel members whose names are on screen now. I really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Thursday in a new video.